The night my mom called me a selfish and greedy thing. I realized love in our family was always something you had to pay for. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lena, I'm 29, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've worked 2 jobs for years, one at a bookstore during the day and one at a diner at night, trying to pay off student loans and save for a little house someday. My mom, Ruth, never liked to talk about money unless it was mine. Every time we went out as a family, she'd push the check toward me with a smile that wasn't really a smile. You make good money now, don't you, Lena? It's the least you can do for all I've done. She always said it like I owed her for being born. And I always paid. Every single time. My little sister, Tess, is 25 and has always been Mom's favorite. She doesn't pay for anything. Mom calls her fragile and says she needs help getting on her feet. Meanwhile, Tess never says thank you, never offers, just sits there playing with her hair while I pull out my card. That night, Mom invited us both to dinner at a place called the Willow Table. She said she wanted a family talk. I should have known better. But I went because I still wanted to believe there was something good left between us. We sat at a corner booth, soft jazz playing, candles flickering. Mom looked extra cheerful, like she'd already decided how the night would end. I ordered wine for the table, she said before I even took off my coat. Tess grinned and said, "Thanks, Mom," knowing full well I'd be the one footing the bill. Dinner went smoothly at first. Mom asked about my job, about the weather, about things she didn't care about. When the food came, she started talking about Tessa's plans for the future, how she might move in with her boyfriend, how she might go back to school, if Lena helps out. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Helps out how? I asked. Mom waved her hand. You know, a little here and there. Family supports family. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I'd supported this family my whole life. Still, I stayed quiet. Then the server brought the check. Like always, Mom slid it toward me, smiling like it was some sweet family tradition. Go ahead, sweetheart. For the first time in my life, I didn't reach for my wallet. I looked right at her and said, "No, Mom, not this time." The smile vanished. Her voice cut through the restaurant. "Excuse me? I'm not paying tonight," I said. My hands were shaking, but I held my ground. Her face twisted. "After everything I've done for you, you can't even buy your mother dinner? You selfish, greedy thing." People turned to stare. Tess just looked down, pretending she wasn't there. I didn't say another word. I just stood up and left. That was the night something broke. But maybe for the first time it broke in the right direction. Lena drove home in silence, the echo of her mother's voice following her through every red light. Selfish. Greedy. The words clung to her like smoke. When she stepped into her apartment, everything felt too quiet, too small. She set her purse on the counter and just stood there, trying to breathe. Her hands still trembled from holding her ground. She dropped onto the couch, staring at the blank wall across from her. The restaurant scene kept replaying in her head. The shocked faces, Tess looking away, her mother's voice rising over the clatter of dishes. For years, she had swallowed that voice, always giving in to keep the peace. Now she could still hear it, sharp and cold, like a punishment for daring to say no. Old memories started coming back one by one. Her 12th birthday, when Ruth said they couldn't afford a cake, so Lena used her babysitting money to buy one. Her 21st, when Ruth forgot to bring a gift but reminded her to pay for dinner since she was an adult now. Even last Christmas, when Ruth had sent a text saying, "You never appreciate what I do." I guess some daughters just stopped caring. Lena rubbed her eyes. Every good memory seemed to have a price tag attached. Tess, on the other hand, was always wrapped in praise. Tess calls me every day. Tess knows how to make her mother feel loved. Tess is the good one. That last line had always been Ruth's favorite. The next morning, Lena met her friend Mara for coffee. Mara had seen the exhaustion written on her face. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," Lena answered, stirring her cup. "She made me feel like I did something wrong." Again, Mara leaned forward. "You didn't. You've been emotionally blackmailed your whole life, and you're finally noticing it." The words hit harder than Lena expected. Emotionally blackmailed. She sat with that for a long time. It was exactly what it felt like, love that came with an invoice. That afternoon, Lena made a quiet decision. She was done paying for dinners, birthdays, guilt trips, all of it. No more apologizing for not being who her mother wanted. She deleted a few old messages, muted her family group chat, and took a deep breath that felt almost like freedom. But Ruth noticed the silence quickly. Within a week, she stopped texting altogether. Then, small whispers started coming from relatives, an aunt mentioning that Ruth said Lena was acting distant. A cousin saying she'd heard Lena, thought she was too good for them now. Lena didn't bother defending herself. Let them think what they wanted. She was tired of explaining. Late one night, her phone lit up with a message from Ruth. "I hope your new attitude keeps you warm when you have no family left." Lena stared at the screen until the words blurred. For once, she didn't cry. She just turned the phone face down and whispered to herself, "I'm done." For the first time in years, she slept through the night. Lena stopped checking her calendar for family dinners. One by one, she declined every invitation, each maybe next time, typed carefully so it wouldn't sound cruel. It felt strange at first. Quiet weekends, no obligations, no fake laughter across candlelit tables. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, but also a little peaceful. Her phone, however, refused to stay quiet for long. Messages from her mother started coming in waves. The first few were polite reminders. "Haven't seen you lately." Then they turned sharper. "I guess money really changes people." Another one followed. "You used to care about family. Now it's all about you." Lena didn't reply. She just watched the words appear, then disappear as if they were echoes of a language she no longer spoke. When Tess joined in, it stung more than she expected. Her sister sent a long message that ended with, "You're being dramatic. Mom's just trying to include you." Tess added a laughing emoji, as if cruelty was a joke between siblings. Lena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She could have argued, but what was the point? They'd already chosen sides, and she knew which side she wasn't on. Instead, she turned her focus inward. She picked up extra shifts at the bookstore, started cooking at home, and began saving. Her bank account slowly grew, and with every dollar she kept for herself, a small piece of guilt chipped away. One afternoon, after a long day, she found herself walking into a therapist's office. The walls were soft gray, the air still. The woman's voice was calm when she asked, "What brings you here, Lena?" Lena hesitated, then said, "My mother." Week after week, the conversations peeled away layers she didn't know existed. The therapist explained how Ruth's control wasn't love. It was narcissism disguised as care, envy masked as concern. She talked about patterns of manipulation, how guilt could be used like a leash. The words felt both painful and freeing. Lena left each session lighter, a little more certain that her mother's version of love wasn't something she had to earn. Still, old habits die hard. Part of her wanted to believe her mother might change, might one day just say "I love you" without a price attached. But another part, the part growing stronger, wanted something different. Not peace, not forgiveness, but justice. Late one evening, she sat at her desk with a box of old receipts and messages. She began sorting through them. Dinner bills in her handwriting, transfers labeled for mom, screenshots of texts asking for help that never came back. She organized them neatly, date by date. She didn't know what she'd do with them yet. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But it felt good to see it all there, the proof that she hadn't imagined the years of taking and taking. When she finished, she sat back in her chair. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Ruth. This time, she didn't even look. She closed the box, slid it under the bed, and whispered, "Not tonight." The call came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Ruth's voice filled the line, sweet but sharp around the edges. "Good news," she said. "Your sister's engaged. We're having a small family dinner to celebrate. Friday night. You'll be there, won't you?" Lena hesitated. Every part of her knew better than to say yes. But the thought of Tess, excited and glowing, softened something inside her. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come." Friday came too fast. Lena stood in front of her closet, staring at the same two dresses she always wore to family events. She picked the black one, simple, safe, and told herself she'd leave at the first sign of trouble. The restaurant was warm and loud, laughter spilling from every corner. Tess was already there, beaming, her diamond ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. Ruth sat beside her, perfectly composed, a picture of control. "Lena," her mother said, arms opening wide like nothing had ever gone wrong. "You made it. I knew you wouldn't miss your sister's big night." Lena forced a smile and took her seat. Tess leaned over and showed her the ring. "Isn't it perfect?" she said. Eli picked it himself. "It's beautiful," Lena said, and she meant it. Tess looked genuinely happy, and for a moment, that felt enough. Dinner went smoothly until dessert arrived. Ruth clinked her glass for attention. "Everyone, I have a little announcement." She turned toward Tess and smiled. "Your sister and I have been talking, and I've decided I'll cover most of the wedding costs." "Of course," she added, turning her gaze toward Lena. "Lena's going to help out too." The words landed like a slap. Lena blinked. "I never said that," she replied, her voice calm but cold. Ruth tilted her head. "Come on, honey. You make good money now, don't you? You can handle it. It's your sister's wedding. Don't be stingy." Tess shifted in her chair, eyes darting between them. "Mom, maybe," she began, but Ruth raised a hand. "No, Tess. Your sister's being selfish again, just like always." Then, louder so the table could hear, she added, "She's the reason this family falls apart. Every time." Conversations around them went quiet. The waiter froze mid-step. Tess's fiancé stared down at his plate. Lena sat still, the heat rising in her chest. But she didn't cry. Not this time. She took her napkin, folded it neatly, and set it beside her plate. Then she looked her mother in the eye. "I won't pay for love anymore," she said softly. Without another word, she stood and walked out. The sound of her heels on the floor echoed through the restaurant. Outside, the air was cool and sharp against her face. For the first time in years, her hands weren't shaking. Beneath the anger, something else began to stir, calm, deliberate, dangerous. She wasn't just walking away anymore. She was planning. A week after the disastrous dinner, Lena got a message from a number she hadn't seen in years. It was her Aunt Della, her father's younger sister. The text was short. "Can we talk? It's about your mom." They met the next evening at a quiet cafe near the river. Della looked older, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were kind. She reached across the table and took Lena's hand. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "Your mother's been running her mouth again. But there's something you should know, something I should have told you long ago." Lena felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" Della sighed. "When your dad passed, he left a small life insurance policy. It wasn't much, but he wanted it for you for college. He told me he wanted you to have a fair start." Lena frowned. "I never got anything. Mom always said he didn't leave much." "That's because she took it," Della said quietly. "She used it to pay off her credit cards and cover Tessa's tuition at Western State. I found out years later, but by then, well, Ruth didn't want anyone questioning her choices." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Lena stared at her aunt, unable to speak. Her father's voice came back to her in flashes, his promise that she'd never have to struggle the way he did. She thought about the double shifts, the student loans, the endless nights of exhaustion. All along, the help she needed had been there, just stolen before it reached her. "Are you sure?" she finally asked. Della nodded, her expression heavy with guilt. "I wish I wasn't. I still have a copy of the insurance papers. Your name's right there, clear as day." Lena sat back, trying to breathe. The noise of the cafe faded. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. Years of debt, years of guilt, all built on a lie her mother told without blinking. "She took everything," Lena whispered, "and then made me pay her back for it." Della looked down. "I wanted to step in back then, but Ruth made it impossible. She said it was a family matter." "I'm sorry, sweetheart." Lena forced a small smile. "Don't be sorry. You told me the truth. That's more than she's ever done." When she left the cafe, the evening air was cold, the river wind sharp against her skin. She walked for blocks without noticing where she was going, every step pounding with the same thought. She stole from me. My own mother. By the time she reached her apartment, the shock had turned to something else, steady and clear. She sat at her desk, staring at the pile of documents she'd already gathered, the texts, the receipts, the dinner bills. Now she knew what they were for. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about taking back her voice. Lena opened her laptop and created a new folder. She titled it Truth. Her hands no longer trembled. The fear was gone. The plan had just begun. Lena emptied the bottom drawer of her desk and spread its contents across the kitchen table. Faded bills, stamped envelopes, bank statements with small transfers circled in blue ink. She handled each paper like a piece of memory, careful, deliberate, searching for the lines that would prove what she suspected. There were late-night receipts from family dinners, screenshots of conversations where promises melted into requests, and a photocopy of a check made out to Ruth with Lena's name typed on the map. Everything fit together like a ledger of favors that had never been reciprocated. She spent the next few days cross-referencing dates, scanning documents, and labeling folders on her laptop. Old emails from the insurance company sat in a neglected account until she dug them up. Policy numbers, beneficiary designations, a short note that mentioned college funds. Her breath caught when she printed the page that carried her father's signature. The signature was small but solid. He had intended that money for her. Reading it felt like finding a missing page in a life she'd been living without. When she had a neat stack of evidence, she called Della. Her aunt answered on the second ring, voice low and quick. "I thought you might call." Lena didn't waste time reciting the facts. She laid everything out instead. What she'd found, how it matched the stories Della had hinted at, and why she needed counsel. Della listened and then, after a pause that stretched long enough to be a small apology, offered blunt advice. "You need to make this public," she said. "People like her crumble when the light hits them. Private pleas won't work. She'll twist them. Put it where everyone can see." The idea felt dangerous and electric. Lena imagined her mother's face when confronted. Imagined the hush that would fall across a room while relatives shuffled in their seats. She pictured Tessa's expression, confusion, betrayal, something raw. The plan took shape in her mind like a photograph developing in the dark. The engagement party, speeches, toasts, the moment Ruth would claim pride and sacrifice. That would be the opening. She rehearsed quietly. She printed clean copies of the insurance letter, highlighted transfers that matched Ruth's deposits to Tessa's college account, and compiled a timeline showing how money had moved over the years. She created duplicates and tucked extras into an envelope labeled only with a date. Then she practiced what she would say, short, factual, without flourish, because she wanted no room for her words to be gaslit or dismissed as drama. Despite the preparation, nerves gnawed at her the night before the party. Alone in her bathroom, she stared into the mirror with the evidence stacked on the counter behind her. The woman staring back looked tired but determined, the kind of tired that had learned how to move forward. Lena breathed in, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest loosen just a fraction. She leaned closer and formed the vow differently than she might have before. No more buying approval, she told her reflection. The sentence felt right, clean, final, hers. It steadied her. She arranged the printed papers in the order she planned to present them, slid them into a slim folder, and laid it by the door. Tomorrow, she would not be silent. Tomorrow, she would let the truth do the speaking. The restaurant glowed with soft light, all marble floors and gold accents. Waiters moved like clockwork, carrying trays of champagne and miniature desserts. The tables were lined with white roses and crystal glasses. Ruth had picked the place herself, insisting it was the only venue classy enough for Tessa's engagement celebration. Ironically, none of it was on her dime. The groom's parents had paid for everything. Lena arrived on time, folder tucked in her bag, her stomach coiled tight. She'd dressed simply in navy blue, something neutral that wouldn't draw attention. The sound of laughter floated through the room as she stepped inside. Ruth spotted her first, gliding over with open arms and a perfect hostess smile. "Lena, sweetheart, you look lovely," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "See, I told everyone you wouldn't miss your sister's big night." Lena returned a polite nod, forcing a small smile. "Wouldn't have missed it," she said quietly. Tess came next, radiant and flushed, her ring catching every glimmer of light. She hugged Lena, whispering, "Please, just keep things peaceful tonight." Her tone was nervous, pleading. Lena nodded once, saying nothing more. As guests settled, Ruth floated around the tables, greeting everyone like royalty. She laughed loudly, gestured grandly, and accepted every compliment about how beautiful the party was, as though she had personally paid for each candle. If anyone noticed the tension between her and Lena, they were too polite to mention it. Dinner moved slowly, salad, wine, laughter that sounded rehearsed. Lena barely tasted her food. Her mind stayed on the folder in her bag, her heart thudding against her ribs in rhythm with the clinking of glasses. When dessert arrived, the chatter quieted, and Ruth tapped her spoon against a glass. "Everyone," she announced, standing with a practiced smile, "I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am of my daughters." She placed a hand on Tessa's shoulder, squeezing it. "Raising them hasn't been easy, but a mother makes sacrifices. That's what love is, giving everything you have for your children." A few guests clapped softly. Ruth continued, her voice growing louder. "I've always put my girls first, even when it meant going without. But seeing Tess so happy tonight makes every struggle worth it." The word struck Lena like a slap. Every syllable of sacrifice sounded like theft disguised as virtue. She waited for Ruth to pause, then stood slowly. "Actually," she said, her voice steady, "those sacrifices weren't yours." Every head turned. Ruth blinked, confusion flickering before her face hardened. "Excuse me?" Lena reached into her bag and pulled out the folder. "You said you gave everything for us. But what you gave came from me, money Dad left for my education. You used it to pay off your own debts and for Tessa's tuition. That's not sacrifice, Mom. That's stealing." The words hung in the air like broken glass. The room fell completely still. Tessa's fiancé froze mid-sip, his parents exchanging shocked glances. Ruth's complexion drained to white, her mouth opened, then closed without sound. Someone at the next table whispered, "Oh my God." Lena laid the papers on the tablecloth, each one clear and undeniable. "You wanted an audience," she said softly. "Now you have one." No one moved. The silence was heavier than any scream. Ruth's silence didn't last long. The shock on her face hardened into fury, her voice slicing through the stillness. "That's a lie," she snapped. "You're twisting everything, as usual. You've always been jealous of Tess. You can't stand to see her happy." Lena didn't flinch. She opened the folder, sliding a few printed pages across the table. "These aren't stories, Mom. These are bank transfers, insurance documents, your signature right next to mine. You took Dad's policy, the one meant for my education, and spent it. Every cent." A few guests leaned forward. Tessa's fiancé's mother picked up one of the papers, her brows knitting as she read. Ruth reached to snatch it back, but her hand trembled. "That doesn't prove anything," she said, her voice rising. "Family share. That money was for all of us." Tessa's voice cut through the air, small but shaking. "Mom, is it true?" Ruth turned to her, eyes wide, lips twitching in disbelief. "Don't you start to." You wouldn't even have your degree if it weren't for me. Tess's face crumpled. It wasn't for me, it was hers. You told me she didn't want to go to college. Tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks. You let me take that money. I had no idea. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs growing louder. Ruth stood, her voice cracking into a scream. Stop this right now. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. You're destroying this family, Lena. Lena stayed still. I didn't destroy anything, she said softly. I just stopped pretending. Ruth's chest heaved as she looked around the room for sympathy, but no one spoke. Even Tess couldn't meet her eyes. Her fiancé's parents quietly pushed their chairs back, clearly wanting distance from the spectacle. The weight of judgment settled heavy in the air. Ruth's voice turned desperate. After all I've done, you'd stand here and shame me? In front of strangers, Lena gathered her papers, her movements calm despite the tremor running through her body. You did that yourself. As she turned to leave, she heard Tess sobbing into her fiancé's shoulder, Ruth's voice fading behind her into angry fragments. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped, whispers followed her toward the exit. Her hands shook, but her face stayed dry. Outside, the city air hit cold and sharp, washing the noise away. For the first time, the shaking felt like release. She walked until the restaurant lights disappeared behind her, until her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen lit up with Tess's name. It rang once, twice, then stopped. Moments later, a message appeared. I'm so sorry, Lena. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Another followed. Please, can we talk? Lena stared at the words, her thumb hovering above the screen. She could almost hear her sister's voice breaking through the sobs. But she wasn't ready, not yet. She needed distance, quiet, space to breathe. She locked her phone, slipped it back into her bag, and kept walking. The night felt heavy and cold, but her steps didn't falter. She didn't look back once. Months slid by quietly after the night of the party. The story spread through the family faster than Ruth could contain it. Cousins stopped returning her calls, old friends avoided her at church, and her usual bragging lunches at the country club came to a sudden end. Every conversation she tried to start ended with the same uneasy silence. The perfect image she'd spent years polishing had cracked beyond repair. Lena didn't celebrate that downfall. She just watched from a distance, almost numb. The noise that used to fill her days, the constant need to explain, to apologize, was gone. What replaced it was strange but clean, like standing in an empty room after years of clutter. Tess reached out one afternoon, her voice low and careful. I've been thinking, she said over the phone, about everything. I can't change what happened, but I can try to fix it. She explained that she had started saving to repay what their mother had taken. Half the tuition, she said. It's not all of it, but it's a start. Lena listened, touched but firm. You don't owe me anything, she replied. That money's poisoned. Keep it clean for yourself. Tess was quiet for a long time. I wish I'd seen it sooner, she finally whispered. I know, Lena said softly, but you see it now. That's enough. The calls became more frequent after that, short and gentle, never about their mother. For the first time, their conversations didn't feel like competition. They were just two sisters trying to rebuild something small and honest from the ashes of what had burned. One evening, a thick envelope arrived at Lena's new address, her name written in Ruth's heavy handwriting. She almost didn't open it. When she finally did, the letter inside stretched over several pages. Ruth wrote about sleepless nights, about missing her daughters, about the pain of being misunderstood. Not once did she mention the money or the lies. Every sentence was a plea for forgiveness without ownership. Lena folded the letter back neatly, slipped it into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer she rarely opened. She didn't feel angry anymore, just tired. Some truths didn't need to be revisited to stay true. The new apartment was small but full of light. On the first morning she woke there, sunlight spilled through the curtain, landing on a blank canvas propped against the wall. She hadn't painted in years, not since her father died. She unpacked her brushes slowly, touching the worn wooden handles as if greeting old friends. The first strokes came shaky, but the rhythm returned like breath. She painted until afternoon turned to dusk, colors filling the silence that used to make her uneasy. The quiet no longer meant loneliness, it meant space. When she stepped back, her hands streaked with blue and gold, she smiled faintly. The air around her was still calm, her own. For the first time in her life, she didn't need anyone's approval to feel at peace. The silence was enough. A full year slipped past before Lena heard her mother's name again. It came through a casual comment from her Aunt Della, who mentioned that Ruth had sold her car and was renting out rooms in her old house. She's having a rough time, Della said gently. Most folks won't talk to her anymore. Lena only nodded. She didn't ask for details. The distance between them had grown so wide that even curiosity felt foreign. Her days had filled with work, paint, and small joys, quiet dinners, weekend markets, and easy stillness she'd never known before. The ache that once sat in her chest had dulled into something peaceful. One gray afternoon in December, a letter arrived in handwriting she hadn't seen since the apology that wasn't one. The envelope was thicker this time, the return address scrawled unevenly. She almost tossed it into the drawer with the rest of the unopened mail, but something made her open it instead. Inside was a folded card decorated with holly and a printed message about family blessings. Below it, Ruth's words filled the page. "I know things have been hard, but Christmas is coming, and it's time we put the past behind us. Let's have dinner, just us girls. No drama, no bitterness. I want to make things right." Lena read it twice. The phrasing was careful, every sentence soft enough to sound kind, yet hollow in a way that made her chest tighten. Make things right. It wasn't an apology. It was a summons. Even now, her mother wanted control over the ending. She placed the letter on her desk and stared at it for a long while. Outside, rain brushed against the window, steady and calm. In the space between those quiet drops, she found her answer forming. She pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write, her pen steady, her words simple. "Mom, I've spent enough paying for dinners that cost me my peace. This time, you'll have to eat without me." She read the sentence back once. It carried no anger, no heat, just truth. For a moment, she thought about sealing it and sending it, about the look on Ruth's face when she read it. But then she realized she didn't need her mother to see it at all. The message wasn't for Ruth. It was for herself. She found an old frame, one that had once held a photograph of her and Tess as children, and slipped the note inside. She hung it above her work table where the morning light hit strongest. Each day, when she sat down to paint, her eyes would catch on the small frame, a quiet reminder of what she'd chosen. Christmas came and went. No calls, no new letters. Just snow falling soft outside the window, the faint smell of turpentine and coffee in the air. Lena stood before her painting, brush in hand, surrounded by silence that no longer felt empty. The framed note glowed faintly in the corner of her eye. That, she thought, was all the revenge she needed. Freedom, finally paid in full. "Do you think I did the right thing by walking away? Or should I have given my family another chance? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.